Wherever you are, whether you're winding down from a long day, or perhaps already tucked into bed, take a moment to slow your breathing. Let your shoulders soften. Let your eyes grow heavy, and if they're already closed, all the better. Tonight, we drift gently into the warm, golden haze of ancient Egypt. Not the Egypt of museum glass and towering myths, not just the stories of gilded pharaohs or conquering kings, but the quieter, dustier Egypt, the lived-in Egypt, the Egypt of sandal straps, chisel splinters, half-full beer jars, and linen robes damp with sweat from the sun. Over the next 2 hours, we'll walk slowly through this world. We'll begin beneath the shadow of rising stone, with the backs and hands that actually raised the pyramids. Then we'll step into the reign of Hatshepsut, a woman pharaoh, whose power was hidden in plain sight. Later, we'll gently leaf through the Book of the Dead, not as scholars, but as quiet observers of an ancient people's vision of the afterlife. And finally, we'll pause in the painted stillness of palace corridors, where the court scribes dipped their pens into ink and whispered truths in the language of silence. You don't need to remember every date or name. Let the rhythm of ancient lives carry you. Let the past lull you, slowly, like the slow current of the Nile after sunset. And if sleep finds you along the way, that's perfectly all right. So now, imagine yourself standing in the early light of the Egyptian dawn, and let us begin. The desert morning begins, not in silence, but in softness, a low murmur of voices, the scrape of sandals on stone, the dry whisper of linen against skin. You are near the rising bones of a pyramid, though. To the people around you, it is not yet a wonder of the world. It is a job, a task, a monument to someone else's afterlife. It is Giza, perhaps, or maybe Saqqara. No one calls it that. They just call it the site. Laborers file in from clustered work villages, modest mud brick homes built not far from the construction zone. They're not slaves, not in the way we once imagined. Many are conscripted workers, farmers, sent during flood season when the Nile swells and their crops cannot grow. Others are skilled artisans, stonemasons, rope weavers, or ox drivers. And some are permanent laborers, quietly proud of the role they play in building something meant to last forever. The workday starts early, before the full sun can press its weight against their necks, and before the air thickens with sand stirred by feet and hooves. A laborer's breakfast is simple, flatbread mostly, sometimes lentils, but it is the beer that is most essential. Not the kind of beer you might imagine, bubbly, cold, foamy. This is thick, murky, porridge-like, made from half-baked loaves of barley bread fermented with water. It's calorie-rich, mildly intoxicating, and more nourishing than pleasant. This beer is their payment, in part. It is their fuel. A skilled laborer might receive up to 4 jars a day, one for breakfast, one for midday, one at evening, and perhaps a 4th as a bonus. There are records scratched onto limestone flakes that track these rations, carefully tallied like paychecks. Imagine the scene. A man, his linen kilt tied loosely at the hip dips a reed ladle into his beer jar. He drinks it like a meal. He does not savor it. He needs the strength, and then work begins. Tools are simple: copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, wooden sleds slicked with water. Everything is worn smooth by repeated use, and everything eventually breaks. The chisels dull quickly, so quickly, in fact, that entire teams are assigned to resharpen them. The heat warps the handles. The dust dulls the edge. There's a small pile where broken tools are collected waiting to be melted down or replaced. Sunburn is a constant companion. There is no shidonally thin linen and tightly wrapped head coverings. The worker's skin turns dry, leathery. Cracks form near the elbows and knees. The lucky ones are given oil to rub onto their skin. Most simply ignore it. Yet there are moments of pause. A woven canopy near the quarry provides shade for eating. A basket of dates is passed around. Someone hums a slow song passed down from the south, where the river runs narrower and quieter. A child, perhaps, a worker-s son chases a lizard across the stone and vanishes behind a wall of half-carved blocks. The overseers carry staffs. They do not strike often, but they are feared in silence. They speak little, but they watch everything. There are breaks, yes, and days off sometimes, when the body simply will not rise from the mat in the morning, or when the beer rations arrive late and tempers simmer under the dust. There are records of strikes, calm ones written as petitions, workers demanding more bread, more oil, more beer, and sometimes they got it. Because even in ancient Egypt, the voice of labor had to be listened to, at least a little. Now picture the evening, the long golden fade of sun behind the stones. Shadows stretch along the scaffolding. Tools are put down. Bodies sag with exhaustion. They return to the work village, to the scent of cooking garlic, to low fires and quiet talk, to wives and children if they are lucky, to sleep if they are exhausted, and they are always exhausted. And then the rhythm begins again the next day, stone by stone, line by line, a human pyramid of effort and breath and sunburn. This was the real foundation of the pyramids, not just the limestone or the grandeur, but the rhythm of ordinary people, carving their mark into eternity, one jar of beer at a time. Now, as the moon rises over the unfinished tomb, let us walk quietly away from the dust of the worksite and follow the river up toward the city, toward the palaces and temples, toward the story of a woman pharaoh whose power carved itself into stone just as surely as the pyramid did. As the hush of the laborer-s world fades into the distance, its clinking copper tools and echoing quarry songs now a distant murmur, we step into another realm of ancient Egypt. The stone dust settles, and you find yourself walking beneath painted colonnades, surrounded not by sweat and toil, but by the whispers of ambition, of elegance, of legacy, carved in stone and shaped in silence. This is the world of Hatshepsut, a name once nearly lost to the sands, a woman who ruled not from behind a curtain of male advisors, but as pharaoh in her own right. Imagine yourself here, among the golden years of Egypt's 18th dynasty, around 1479 BCE, where temple walls glint in the light and ceremonial incense curls lazily toward the blue, unwavering sky. You walk slowly past limestone reliefs, their surfaces still smooth beneath centuries of sun and sand. The images tell a story, though some are chipped or chiseled, altered by those who came later. A slender figure stands tall in the carvings, often dressed in the royal kilt and false beard of a king. This is Hatshepsut, depicted not merely as queen, but as pharaoh. She was not the first royal woman of Egypt, but she was the first to command such lasting architectural and spiritual authority. Her father was Thutmose I, and upon his death, the crown passed to her half-brother and eventual stepson, Thutmose III, but he was just a child. And so Hatshepsut ruled as regent. Then something curious happened. She stopped being the regent and began calling herself pharaoh. Historians still debate whether this was political ambition, religious justification, or necessity. But in the quiet stillness of her mortuary temple, nestled into the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, one sees not desperation, but intention. The design of the temple is precise, balanced. A series of terraces rise like a staircase to the gods. You can almost hear the sound of sandals brushing against the flagstone, of priests chanting low prayers as the sun arcs overhead. At its peak, Hatshepsut's reign was peaceful, prosperous, and notably ambitious. Trade missions were revived and expanded. One of the most famous journeys was to the mysterious land of Punt, a place rich in ebony, ivory, gold, and fragrant myrrh trees. Reliefs in her temple show exotic animals and foreign ships bringing gifts up the Nile. Imagine the scent of spices and resin drifting through the air, and the rustling of cargo being unloaded in ancient harbor, alive with motion, even in dreams. But despite this wealth and stability, not all approved of her unprecedented claim to the throne. She had to tread carefully, balancing femininity with the traditional trappings of masculinity that the role of pharaoh demanded. In statues, her form often appears idealized, her face serene, yet strong, neither overtly feminine nor fully masculine, but somewhere in between. A subtle defiance of the binary rules her society tried to impose. Her reign lasted over 2 decades, and then, after her death, something changed. Bit by bit, her name began to disappear. It wasn't an immediate erasure, but over time, statues were toppled, inscriptions were altered, reliefs showing her as pharaoh were chipped away, sometimes replaced by images of her stepson, Thutmose III, now ruling in his own right. Was it revenge, political necessity, or simply a desire to restore tradition? Whatever the motive, the silence around her grew louder. For thousands of years, Hatshepsut's story faded, buried beneath dust and rewritten chronicles. And yet, her temple remained. Hidden in plain sight, it waited. And when modern archaeologists uncovered her story again, they were stunned not only by her ambition, but by the grace and subtle power with which she ruled. The walls of Deir el-Bahari still stand, tiered and symmetrical, shaded by the cliffs that cradle it. Even now, in the quiet of dusk, you might imagine her spirit passing through measured footsteps on ancient stone, surveying the legacy she once commanded. Where segment 1 was filled with the rhythm of hammers and dust, this chapter drifts like perfume through painted halls. It is a story not of sweat and labor, but of strategy, of silence, and of a woman who rewrote the rules of kingship beneath the Egyptian sun. Now, let us move beyond Hatshepsut's reign to a different kind of mystery, not of politics or architecture, but of belief, of the hidden knowledge etched into papyrus scrolls and tucked inside tombs. Let us drift now, ever so gently, into segment 3, and explore the Book of the Dead, its rituals, its whispered spells, and the vivid world the ancient Egyptians imagined after this one. Just breathe, and let us continue. And now, as we leave behind the sunlit colonnades of Deir el-Bahari, the world grows quieter, more still. The golden light fades to twilight, and you find yourself descending into shadow, a fearful one, but one filled with reverence and silence, a hush that speaks not of absence, but of presence, something ancient, something eternal. Imagine yourself walking softly along a corridor deep within a tomb. The air is cool, and dry. The walls on either side are painted with careful hands brush strokes that still carry meaning after thousands of years. Images of boats, jackal-headed gods, fields of reeds, hieroglyphs flowing like water across the stone, guiding both the eye and the soul. This is the world of the Book of the Dead, a name given much later, but one that holds within it the beating heart of Egyptian spirituality. To call it a book is both true and not. It wasn't a single volume, but rather a shifting collection of spells, prayers, illustrations, and rituals compiled, copied, and personalized over generations. You may picture it now. Thin papyrus scrolls, unrolled slowly in the flicker of an oil lamp, the soft rustle of ancient fibers, ink made from soot and ochre, carried across the surface by reed pens. A scribe leans over his work, copying sacred words with a hand steady and practiced. Outside, the desert winds sigh across the sands. Inside, the room is still. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was not a vague abstraction. It was a journey, a process, a landscape just as real as the one they lived in, only hidden behind the veil of death. And so they prepared for it meticulously. From the wealthiest noble to the modest artisan, those who could afford it commissioned these spells, often beginning the process while still alive. The spells offered guidance and protection through the duat, the realm of the dead, a place filled with gates, guardians, trials, and transformations. Perhaps you've heard of one such trial, the weighing of the heart. Here, imagine a quiet chamber in the Hall of Mat. The goddess of truth and justice, Marat, stands by. The heart of the deceased, believed to contain all their deeds, is placed on one side of the scale. On the other side, a single feather. If the heart is heavier, weighed down by wrongs or unfinished regrets, the soul is devoured by Amita, fearsome creature with the body of a lion, the head of a crocodile, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. But if the scales are balanced, the journey continues. The soul moves on to the field of reeds, a place of peace and abundance. Here, the dead could live again in a mirror image of earthly Egypt, only better. No disease, no hunger. Crops grew tall. Families reunited. The sun shone gently, and the Nile flowed ever calmly. To reach this paradise, however, one needed help. Protection from snakes, demons, and divine judges. And so, the Book of the Dead offered spell 6-2, avoid forced labor in the afterlife. Spell 125, to declare innocence of wrongdoing. Spell 30B, to prevent the heart from betraying its owner during judgment. Even names held power. Names were spoken aloud in these texts to ensure remembrance. Without remembrance, a soul might drift, nameless and alone. So, these scrolls preserved more than instructions. They preserved identity. The illustrations, too, were rich in meaning. You might picture Anubis, the jackal-headed god, leaning gently over a mummified body, wrapping it with care. Or Thoth, with the head of an ibis, recording the weight of the heart with quill and palette. These images weren't mere decorations. They were sacred mirrors, reflections of the spiritual landscape. For the living, these texts offered comfort, a sense of control over the unknown. Even today, as we read the delicate strokes of a scribe long vanished, we feel the soft echo of hope that death was not an end, but a transformation. Many tombs still contain fragments of these texts. Some are written on linen, some on coffins, others painted directly on the stone. One might imagine how, as a body was lowered into the tomb, a priest stood nearby, reciting the words aloud, each syllable vibrating against the walls. A final gift of language, meant to carry the soul safely into forever. There is something deeply human in this, not fear, but longing, not finality, but preparation. The Egyptians knew that even in death there was a road to walk, and the Book of the Dead was their map. And now, with our thoughts wrapped gently in scrolls and whispered prayers, we rise once more from the tomb's silence. The light returns, soft and dappled, glinting off polished inkpots and brushed linen. Let us return not to kings or workers, but to the quiet heartbeat of bureaucracy and beauty. Let us step into the world of the scribe papyrus beneath their fingers, perfume in the air, and the subtle murmur of political whispers carried on the breeze. And so, we rise gently from the hush of tombs and the echoes of the afterlife, into something altogether more perfumed, more measured, and quietly indulgent. The world of the court scribe. Imagine yourself now, seated beneath a shaded portico in a spacious villa near the Nile. The columns are painted in hues of faded lapis and dusty gold, and the air is heavy with the scent of sweet myrrh and fresh-cut lotus. A breeze stirs the linen curtains, carrying with it the muffled laughter of courtiers and the distant splash of water in a garden basin. This is not the world of pyramids or priests. This is a world of ink and scrolls, of quiet power. The Egyptian scribe was not just a writer. He was a thinker, a recorder, a gatekeeper of knowledge, and a silent observer of royal whims. In a society where literacy was a rarity, to write was to wield something just shy of magic. And those who wrote for the court, they lived lives both pampered and precise. Picture, if you will, a young scribe preparing for the day. He bathes, first cleansing the desert-esque dust from his skin with water drawn cool from a clay jar. Then comes oil fragrant, thick, a blend of cedar and cinnamon. His linen tunic is freshly laundered, crisp against his sun-warmed skin. He ties a leather pouch around his waist containing a writing kit, slender reed pens, a block of black ink made from charred bones and gum, and a second red ink for marking royal names or special instructions. A small palette, worn smooth by years of use, fits perfectly in his hand. Then, the papyrus scrolls, long, slightly rough sheets, rolled with care. Each sheet bears the weight of time, and soon it will bear the weight of words, some trivial, some fateful. His duties are varied. 1 hour he may be copying a list of temple offerings, 10 geese, 20 baskets of figs, wine from the western district. The next, he records a land grant from Pharaoh himself, single signature, changing the lives of a family for generations. And then there is the gossip, for in the palace, words travel faster than the Nile in flood. A raised eyebrow at court, a servant dismissed in haste, a delay in payment to a favored builder. The scribe records the reason, or the version approved for posterity. In this way, scribes become archivists of both fact and fiction. Their position affords them access not just to ink and scroll, but to the beating heart of the palace. They sit quietly behind curtains, hearing what others miss. They translate the divine whims of Pharaoh into policy. Their words outlast monuments. The food they eat is good fine bread, dates soaked in honey, roasted duck or lentils, seasoned with imported spices. Their fingers are stained faintly with ink, but their nails are clean. Their homes are modest by noble standards, yet well-appointed alabaster oil jars, carved headrests, bowls of faience beads. A cat dozes on a cushioned mat nearby, undisturbed by the weight of history being quietly written. And yet, this life of comfort is not without its pressures. Mistakes in a scroll can carry consequences. A misplaced symbol might confuse an entire decree. Some scribes, wary of error, whisper quiet prayers before beginning their day's work, invoking Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, with the head of an ibis and the bearing of silence. There are even guidebooks for scribes in training. One famous text, the Satire of the Trades, extols the virtues of the scribe's life by mocking every other profession: bakers who burn their hands, fishermen who stink of the river, farmers bent double in fields of biting insects. Be a scribe, the text repeats. It is the best of all callings, and perhaps it was. Because while the hands of others were blistered and cracked, the scribe's fingers turned pages. While others shouted to be heard, the scribe's ink whispered permanence. In times of political upheaval, the scribes often remained. Dynasties might rise and fall, generals exiled or executed, priests lose favor. But the scribes remained quietly recording it all. Their reward was subtle. Comfort, yes. Safety, often. But more than that, a quiet kind of immortality. Their work was not always signed, but it was seen. It endured. And tonight, of secrets written on scrolls and sealed with wax, you might feel the gentle rhythm of their days. The quiet power of being the one who remembers when all others forget. Let that rhythm continue to lull you gently, as we now bring our long, unhurried journey through ancient Egypt to its close. And with that, and so, dear listener, we come to the end of our journey, an unhurried drift down the ancient Nile, where time itself seems to shimmer on the water's surface, and the past lingers like the scent of myrrh on linen. We have walked the dust-choked paths alongside the pyramid laborers' men who built eternity block by aching block, paid not in gold, but in bread, onions, and beer. We felt the dry sting of the sun on their backs, and the cool relief of shade beneath unfinished stones. We stood in the shadow of a forgotten Queen Hatshepsut who ruled not with fire and conquest, but with patience, trade, and stone. A woman whose temple still clings to the cliffs like a secret, and whose legacy whispers through columns of silence and sand. We opened the sacred scrolls of the afterlife, the book of the dead, and traced with gentle awe the fears and hopes of a people who believed that life was but a prelude to something greater, who believed that one's heart would one day be weighed not against riches, but against truth. And finally, we tiptoed into the perfumed world of the court scribes, those quiet architects of legacy. With ink-stained fingers and measured words, they preserved the drama, the decree, and the daily rhythm of Egypt's golden age, invisible yet eternal. Each layer of this story, like the strata beneath an ancient tomb, tells us something deeper, not just about Egypt, but about ourselves, about labor and leadership, about death and desire, about memory. Tonight, as you rest your head and the world grows quieter around you, you might carry with you the murmur of chisels on stone, the rustle of papyrus unfurling, the soft echo of sandals across temple floors. These are not loud stories. They are gentle ones, worn smooth by centuries of retelling. They ask little, they offer much. And now you are part of them. Breathe slowly. Let the night stretch long and soft around you. The pyramids will wait. The ink has dried. The Nile continues its patient flow. And sleep like the afterlife imagined by the ancients comes gently now, wrapped in quiet wonder. Good night.